We've got a young lady on the line here with us today. She's from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. She's director of the U.S. Coalition for Life. And she's done research on some of these organizations that you wouldn't necessarily think of as being eugenics. And you'd think they'd be actually the opposite of eugenics. But when you start studying them, they really are. Her name's Randy Engel. Hello, Randy.
Hello.
Thank you for joining us today.
It's good to give some more feedback because this fits right into the Tiller controversy.
Yes, because he was, like Troy said, he was the go-to guy for all the eugenics and eugenicists in the world. You have come up with some information. I saw a thing, an article that was titled "The A to Z of Eugenics Killing," basically talking about the March of Dimes. Tell us what you found out with the March of Dimes.
Well, the March of Dimes battle with pro-lifers has gone on for just about 50 years. And I think I can honestly say that it's thanks to the pro-life movement. The eugenics movement in the United States has probably been set back 30 or 40 years. The largest and the most prominent of these eugenic organizations has been the March of Dimes. Now, if you recall, Mark, the National Foundation for Infantile Paralysis, that was formed back in 1937 to fight polio. But by 1958, the March of Dimes decided to switch from polio to birth defects. And so they embarked on a massive program, actually, of eugenic cleansing, so that their attack was really not on birth defects, but on the unborn child suspected of having the birth defects. And so we've got this huge eugenic mafia at the March of Dimes, well-funded, and actually, when we started fighting the March of Dimes, the primary issue was their programs to search and destroy, largely through the use of various forms of prenatal diagnosis, mid-trimester amniocentesis, photoscopy, or there were other forms. But that was actually only the beginning, because they went further. They went into this whole area of live fetal experimentation, which they conducted on what they refer to as TBAs. Do you know what a TBA is?
Never heard it.
TBA is a to-be-aborted woman. And much of the live fetal experimentation funded by the March of Dimes was carried out on these so-called TBAs. They also funded the use of tissues and organs from live aborted babies. There was a Dr. Crocker, he used fetal livers. There was a Dr. Roby, he used intact reproductive tracts. There was Dr. Adams, and if your listeners are, I hope they're sitting down, because Adams was given funds to experiment in the area of glucose metabolism in the fetal brain. What that translated was that he was sent to Helsinki, Finland, and he delivered live babies by hysterotomy, and then he severed their heads and mounted them on perfusion equipment. And the Adams grant was in fact funded by the March of Dimes. We have other March of Dimes grantees like Robert Schwartz. He used various fetal parts in his experimentation. And we have a guy by the name of De La Chapelle who did a procedure by which he punctured the hearts of unborn children, and in order to obtain fetal blood for assessment.
Well, we did as I'm sure you're aware, we're the organization that did all the undercover work on exposing the trafficking of body parts from abortion clinics.
Oh, yes, I remember that very well.
And, everything you're saying just matches up like gears in a transmission to what we found there. I mean, some of the most, people think, these people are ghouls. Surely they wouldn't be doing this. Americans wouldn't be doing this. Decent people wouldn't be doing this, and governments wouldn't be funding it. The United States government is up to their eyeballs in this stuff.
Sure.
Yeah, and I would say that, the organizations like the March of Dimes, which are private foundations, they had a advantage over government grantees in the fact that private foundations are not bound by the government regulations, let's say prohibiting live fetal experimentation.
Right.
So while that ban existed, the contributions of the gullible American public made it possible to conduct these unethical experiments on live aborted babies. Of course, they were done without much fanfare, but they were carried out. And the result, you say, well, what is the result of this 50-year battle, this love affair between eugenics and the March of Dimes? Well, what we've got is we got the Genetics Disease Act, which formally incorporated eugenics into the federal government medical program. We've got eugenics as standard medical practice right now, and we've injected into the American mind the whole eugenics philosophy, which is there are children who are better off not being born, and it's been actually a horrendous battle. But I'm proud to say that I've been part of it, you've been part of it, and, with God's help, we can just continue this battle because I'm sure we've cost the March of Dimes millions and millions and millions of dollars, which otherwise would have gone into more eugenic killing.
Wow.
People don't believe this.
I'll tell you what, I want the viewers to recognize this. You could probably do a whole video on this, Mark. I mean, it's another 2-hour deal. There's so much that she's saying here. But recognize the fact that March of Dimes is receiving millions of dollars. They're very politically connected, and so many people give to the March of Dimes. But they are using their money to do eugenics, and in order to show the public their successes, they're saying we've reduced childhood disease, not by finding cures, but by eliminating the children with the diseases.
Do we know who their founders are? Because if it's 50 years ago, this is all about the time of Sanger, Planned Parenthood, American Eugenics Society.
If you went back, and this is what we found out in this all the research we did, and some of you guys have seen it. I mean, the stuff that's in my Alpha 21 is 2 to 3% of all that we found.
Right.
And what you find is that when you start investigating this stuff, you start going down each little rabbit trail, it blends out and goes into Lord knows where. And if you were to research it, let's say you were to zero in and say, I'm going to find out who was responsible for all this stuff with March of Dimes, I'll guarantee you're going to find out that at some point it's going to be connected to Rockefeller, it's going to be connected to Carnegie, it's going to be connected to the American Birth Control League, it's going to be connected to the American Eugenics Society, it's going to be connected to Cold Spring Harbor, New York, and then you're going to connect it to the Nazis in Germany at the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute. All this stuff is intermixed. And it is so complex that that's what protects it, because you get to studying this stuff and you think, I'm getting a headache just reading this stuff.
Wow. I remember telling someone, even when we saw Mark 20, I said, do you realize Mark was working on this thing, and that was just one chapter of a book he was doing.
Right.
That was just from, and he would look at it, and I just want to ask Randy, just so we could just make it plain for little old Johnny Hunter here. You are saying that when people fund March of Dimes, some of their monies are actually being used for severed head experiments.
That's what I'm saying. I think it's important to know of. Let me make two remarks, which I probably should have opened with. And number one, these so-called multi-million-dollar public health charities, there's nothing charitable about them, and there's nothing healthy about them. What their mainstay is good public relations, which is essential to keep these organizations going. They have high-salaried national offices. They have bloated staffs. So it's really important to keep the money coming. And money is the name of the game. And if they have a research disaster, which they had with the Salk vaccine, they cover it up and they pass failures off as as I said, absolute gullible public.
Right. Well, I think one of the problems is, and you kind of touched on it a minute, Randy, I don't think it's totally that they're gullible. I think we have devolved into a society whose only concern is self-interest and whose moral principle is based on utilitarianism. So in other words, we can look out here at abortion or at the things you're talking about or at the things we exposed in the baby parts deal and say, people can say, oh, yeah, that's not good. I'm not proud of that. I'm not proud that I live in a country that does those things or a government that funds it or these organizations that get tax-exempt status to do these things. But on the other hand, you know, there's some good that can come from this. If we can cure Parkinson's, if we can cure AIDS, if we can cure Alzheimer's, if we can cure blindness and cancer, and look, we wiped out polio. Well, you know, I'm proud that we wiped out polio. My mother had polio, so I'm glad we wiped out polio. But I think the thing that we have to always do here is say, at what cost do these things occur? In other words, if we can say we can wipe out cancer, but the cost of that will be a moral depravity of epic proportions, is that worth it?
But Mark, most people don't weigh that.
No.
They catch.
That's what I'm saying.
They catch a 30-second TV commercial during an NFL game, and they say donate to March of Dimes, and they drag out some children with polio or cystic fibrosis or something, or somebody with cancer, and then the people go, gosh, that's horrible. I'd like to see these young kids grow up and play football. I'm going to give them $25.
Do you guys have an online presence as far as getting this message out, social networking to the younger generation?
Yes, we do. We have the U.S. Coalition for Life archives, actually, and that's at www.uscl.info.
Do you have like a Facebook page, Joe?
No, we don't yet, but the information that we do have on the March of Dimes, including the Adams Grant and all this information, the information on the Association for Retarded Citizens, all this information is available through the archive.
Yeah, I want to work with you to do that because, I mean, I've been in the pro-life movement for 12, 15 years now. I feel old, but we need this information out there on Facebook because you've got a whole new generation. We have causes on Facebook where you can, I almost noticed, a cause can give $10 to this organization. And you have millions of people in these causes. Yeah. We need an anti-cause for this.
Randy, are you still there?
Yes, I am.
Okay, we thought we lost you there for a second.
I want to know if your average person you come in contact with and share this stuff with, do they find it hard to believe? Because I've found people that are in disbelief that Tiller did what he did. They can't believe that.
Actually, I would say as a rule, when they read the March of Dimes primer, which is the A to Z of eugenic killing on the March of Dimes, we get an instant convert. The only people that so far we've been unable to convert, having read the information, are those who are hired employees of the March of Dimes.
Well, listen.
It seems that if they're making their living off baby killing, they're less likely to be influenced. But your average American, when they are faced with the evidence, they don't contribute to the March of Dimes anymore. They go over to the alternative, which is, of course, the International Foundation for Genetic Research, popularly known as the Michael Fund. So we do have an alternative, and that's probably as good a message. Part of the message is not only are we condemning the March of Dimes for its eugenic policy, but we're also doing something along the positive line by providing a pro-life alternative.
Good.
Well, listen, Randy, we're going to put the website up there again, this uscl.info, and you just keep up the good battle. I mean, it's amazing when you start getting in these life issues, how many facets there are to it. You know, everybody's doing something, and as long as somebody's doing something, I don't care what it is, just get out there and expose these things and keep fighting away.
Well, we'll certainly be fighting for life because it's really a fight for God.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Randy.
You're very welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.